So welcome to our webinar today, Disrupting Harm Against Children. My name is Akari Yamada. This event is jointly organized by my organization, the Pan-Pacific and Southeast Asian Women's Association, and ECPAT International. PPSEAWA is an international women's organization devoted to peace, cooperation, and the socioeconomic development of women and girls in the Asia-Pacific region. ECPAT International is a global network of civil society organizations that works to end the sexual exploitation of children. So I would like to open the meeting today with a very special welcome to my PPSEAWA sisters from Fiji, Japan, Malaysia, New Zealand, Pakistan, Taiwan, Thailand, and the United States. And I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement. I respect your ancestral and learned knowledge. I am grateful for your shared wisdom and actions and diverse life experiences. And I trust you. I trust you to hold me accountable for my words and actions. So as PPSEAWA's first vice president, I am privileged to work with wonderful leaders, President Mandia and second vice president, Dr. Raj. In fact, all credit for the collaboration and organization for this event lies with Dr. Raj. We truly benefit daily from her expertise and her compassion. PPSEAWA is a non-governmental organization accredited to ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. This parallel event during the 66th session on the Commission on the Status of Women is intended to amplify implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. 20 years ago, the growth of online child sexual exploitation led to an optional protocol specifically to criminalize child pornography and child sexual abuse materials. Yet children remain at risk for exploitation and abuse more than ever today. During the past 2 years, under the COVID-19 global pandemic, we see our children spending more time online for school and socializing. Unfortunately, so do child sexual predators. The disturbing reality is that the internet and communication platforms we rely on every day to connect with each other and share information, such as our chat rooms, the ways that we share video and photo files, and online gaming, are also used to disseminate child sexual abuse materials and can lead to violence against children. This event today will address online child sexual exploitation from multi-country perspectives in Asia. Insights and research from our esteemed panelists can improve our understanding of the pathways to exploitation and what children need in terms of protection and services. I believe we share a common ethical thread. Children's rights apply in the digital world. We must work together to establish safe online environments for all children, to center children's perspectives within protection services, and find ways to prevent online child abuse before it occurs. PPSEAWA's mission has been to eradicate the root socioeconomic conditions that lead to exploitation, offering education and financial literacy access for the underserved, particularly for girls and women, holding campaigns against gender-based violence, and raising awareness of how environmental and social factors impact the health outcomes for women and girls. We understand how traditional barriers impede implementation of gender equality. It may be hard to think of our children as having sexual feelings and interests, but children are naturally curious and thrive with attention. We have found ways in PPSEAWA to overcome cultural taboos, to promote the sexual and reproductive health of girls, and to reduce the stigma surrounding disclosure of violence against children. So I would like to offer one small example from PPSEAWA of a best practice for prevention in an overlooked population. Recognizing that children with severe physical disabilities or intellectual disabilities are especially vulnerable, PPSEAWA Thailand organized a workshop on online safety for 226 elementary and secondary school students at a school for children with disabilities. Information was disseminated through comics, a medium accessible for children. The comics touched on protecting oneself from online threats, one's right to establish boundaries, and on ways of connecting positively online. In general, we could use more school-based and community-based programs to ensure that children know their rights and can engage in healthy relationships. We need to support families so caregivers can better understand children's online activities. And we need to provide coping skills and tools for families to engage in open dialogue with their children about risky online behavior. So at this juncture, I want to acknowledge you, the attendees. I want to thank you for taking time out today to be present with us in this moment. On behalf of PPSEAWA, I give our heartfelt appreciation for your commitment to protecting the most vulnerable members of our communities, our children. I see your presence here as a sign of hope and of change. We value your contributions. Whether you are the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the sale and sexual exploitation of children, or a healthcare worker, a teacher, a community activist, and a caregiver. Actually, you may be someone fulfilling all of these roles in your daily life. Please use the chat today to share your names and organizations and to uplift each other's work. At this point, I would like to hand the meeting over to our moderator, Thomas Mueller. He currently serves as Deputy Executive Director at ECPAT International. Thomas has 20 years of experience in the field of child protection, child rights, advocacy, and management in government and non-government organizations. He studied social work with a specific focus on child rights and child protection. He started his career in the private sector as a provider of frontline child protection services. So truly, Thomas, thank you today for your consideration and efforts behind the scenes to ensure that we have a successful panel today.
Thank you, Akari, for your kind opening remarks, and good morning, good evening, wherever you are from here in Bangkok, Thailand. ECPAT International, as Akari mentioned to you, is a global CSO network actively working towards ending child sexual exploitation in over 100 countries. We are in our 32nd year of existence, and during that time, we learned many things about child sexual exploitation and what is needed to end it. We have learned that it's a growing problem, a problem that is evolving, getting increasingly complex, that is a borderless crime and transcends all the legal or geographic boundaries countries have put in place, and that no region, no country, and no community anywhere in the world is immune against child sexual exploitation. One of the most important lessons, though, that we've learned is that we cannot solve this problem in isolation. Everyone needs to play a role, from government, the private sector, civil society, academia, every one of us individuals, communities, caregivers, parents, and of course, children themselves. And we need to collaborate at a whole different level if we are to ever get ahead of this problem and not always only address symptoms. Therefore, we at ECPAT are always seeking to build partnerships. And so we're extremely privileged to partner with an organization like PPSEAWA with almost 100 years of history of promoting women's rights, being fully devoted to empowering women, families, and peace in the Asia-Pacific region. And so I've mentioned the three things that really bring us together today: girls and women, the Asia-Pacific region, and child sexual exploitation. International Women's Day just happened earlier this month, and it's very encouraging to see how that day has been again used by organizations and individuals around the world to promote gender equality and the empowerment of women. In addition to that, the Commission on the Status of Women is the key instrument in promoting women's rights and in documenting the reality of women's lives throughout the world, and helps shape standards on gender equality and the empowerment of women. We're delighted to have the opportunity to use this event in the context of CSW66 to highlight some of these realities in the lives of girls and to dedicate this session to better understand child sexual exploitation and to disrupt harm against children. Just seeing, yeah, the slide is up. Very good. Thank you so much. You can see on the slides, we have an excellent panel of great experts on these issues, and I will make sure to introduce them to you in a bit more detail when they are about to come on and help us better understand child sexual exploitation of children in the different settings. We will hear from ECPAT Malaysia about the scenarios, challenges, and opportunities in addressing child sexual exploitation in Malaysia and get a better insight into different settings in which children are exploited. We will hear about the Disrupting Harm Research Project led by ECPAT International in collaboration with UNICEF Innocenti and Interpol to better understand online child sexual exploitation and abuse. And while Disrupting Harm explores this issue in 13 countries across Asia and Africa, today we will particularly hear about Disrupting Harm in Thailand. And while it's widely accepted that girls are disproportionately at risk of sexual exploitation and that the vast majority of offenders are male, there's a clear need to better understand the situation of boys and explore their childhood experiences with sexual exploitation. After all, the lived experiences of boys and violence against women are related. We will therefore hear from ECPAT Korea about ECPAT's Global Boys Initiative, and in particular about their research project into the sexual exploitation of boys in South Korea. I hope they're coming on. We're still trying to connect them. They have committed to attend and present, and soon we will welcome a representative from there. And then finally, we will have the privilege to have with us today the chair of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, Mikiko Otani, who will, after those three presentations, provide us all with some concluding observations and remarks. So we have a lot of things to get through, and we are planning to give the floor to the four speakers for their interventions for about 10 to 12 minutes, with a little bit of wiggle room for maybe 2 minutes more or less. If you do have a question to any of the speakers, we will open the floor after those interventions, but do make sure to type your questions in the chat at any time, and our team monitoring the chat, basically Akari's family, will filter through those so they can be presented during the question and answer sessions at the end. So I believe everything is set for a session offering both a lot of data, input and knowledge, and a lot of room for participation, interaction, and hopefully a very lively discussion. So much for housekeeping, and without further ado, please let me introduce to our first speaker. We've mentioned Dr. Raj. Welcome, Dr. Raj. Great to see you here with us. Dr. Raj Abdul Karim has dedicated her lifetime to promoting health and well-being of women, children, and families, and has been the prime mover of many policies and programs that are in place in Malaysia today. Under her leadership in the 70s and 80s, she transformed Malaysia's maternal and child health services, which has led to drastic declines in maternal and infant mortality. She was director of the Public Health Institute at the Ministry of Health and Director General of the National Population and Family Development Board. Dr. Raj served as a regional director for East and Southeast Asia and the Pacific of the International Planned Parenthood Federation. She was a commissioner to the National Human Rights Commission in Malaysia, where she, among other things, initiated work on addressing human trafficking, a topic that we will touch upon today. Dr. Raj is recipient of various awards, including the United Nations Malaysia Award in 2008 and the Patrons Award from the Malaysian AIDS Foundation for her achievements on sexual reproductive health rights for women and children. Dr. Raj is also the president of the Malaysian Council of Child Welfare, which constitutes one of the three organizations that make up ECPAT Malaysia, which she is also the chair of. She was moderator of ECPAT International Assembly, the International Assembly between 2014 and 2018, and is vice president of our hosts, PPSEAWA. Dr. Raj is joining us today from, I believe, Kuala Lumpur. Please, Dr. Raj, the floor is yours. You have around 10 to 12 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Good evening, wherever you are. I'm sorry my voice is a little husky. I'm not that well, but I'll try to do my best today. I'm going to give us a case study on Malaysia's child exploitation scenario. But before I do that, I'd like to recognize everyone that is here for all your work, your contribution, your dedication, and your commitment to this very important issue of preventing sexual exploitation of children. It doesn't matter who we are, where we are, but it is important that we do what needs to be done. Okay, next slide. Okay, just to give a perspective of where we are, Malaysia, the one in red, we have Peninsular Malaysia, and we have 2 islands in Borneo, Sabah and Sarawak, that make up Malaysia. And as the travel and tourism industry say, Malaysia is truly the heart of Asia. And they say that because we are a multiracial country and we have lots and lots of foreigners who either come legitimately documented to work here, and plus refugees and asylum seekers. So we have about 33 million population and about 2 million that are unregistered documents, although UNHCR only registers 181 refugees and asylum seekers that come from all over, from Palestine, from Iraq, from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Myanmar, Indonesia, etc. Okay, the next one. And we're also the center of trafficking. So why, since I have the first floor, I thought we can just have a common page on where we are. So I'm going to start by saying that children somewhere, every day, everywhere are being harmed physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, and sexually. And we have lots and lots of data to show this from WHO, from End Violence Fund, from ECPAT International for sure. And it is our concern. Harming children is our concern. In ECPAT International, we talk about harming children in various aspects, in child sexual abuse and exploitation that covers commercial sex exploitation. We used to call it child prostitution, right? And that's how ECPAT began, actually, with working on child prostitution or child sex workers. We have online sexual exploitation and abuse. That's our theme for today. We have sexual exploitation in travel and tourism, something that is relatively new to many of us. Early child and forced marriage, which is a traditional harmful practice. Child trafficking, child labor, and I added one, which is children in armed conflicts, looking at the situation in Ukraine and, as a situation of children in armed conflict has been in the front or in the fore of all of our work. Okay, the next one, Maddie. Harming children online. Why should we be concerned? I think we heard from Thomas that it is important that all of us play our part, because all of us need to be concerned. It is our concern. It is a family concern. It's a community concern, no matter who we are. Yeah. So child exploitation has no borders. It can happen to any child. It can happen to your child, my grandchild, anyone. It happens at home. During COVID, most of the children have been at home with their laptops, of course, having to study online, but we don't know what happens in between the studying online. So a lot of this online exploitation happens at home, in children's bedrooms, and most of the time parents are not aware of what's happening. When children enter into intimate relationship with perpetrators, it can be consensually, because they may be friends, or they like the person, or they, find it mutually beneficial and friendly to chat with someone on the other side. Or on the other hand, they may be forced or threatened or coerced, and definitely they are being groomed to do what the perpetrators want them to do. So it's a very dangerous situation that we're in now. Although we say we are safe at home, we're really not safe. Okay, next one, please. Okay, and it is also important to know that children are not aware of the dangers of sharing images. I think all of us have a story to tell here. of a child who innocently shares her image, and then she doesn't realize what's happened because it's gone to a friend or someone that she trusts. But all of a sudden, she finds it staring into her face or into her parents' face and into the face, meaning computers, yeah, or into other people, the peers, the friends, etc. And there have been stories where children have been so traumatized by this that they resort to self-harm. And circulation of images leads to child being traumatized with serious effects, including mental, psychological, emotional breakdown, and self-harm. I'd like to tell you a story here about what happened in Malaysia a few years ago, just before COVID, because we don't talk so much about cyberbullying here, but in Malaysia, cyberbullying is the #1 cause of online sexual exploitation. And there was a girl who sent out a poll, you know, online, and she says, LD, LD, which means, should I live, should I die? Should I live, should I die? So people entered in the poll, and the poll says D, means die. And the girl actually committed suicide. I think this was on Facebook. And at that time, Ying, we did this seminar in Taiwan, right, on sexual exploitation. And the Google lady was there, Snow White, she's head of policy, etc. And I asked her, I said, what happened? Why was not this poll taken down? Because it's something that's very dangerous. And she said that they monitored it, but not in time, because children today use a very different language when they write online, you know. And yeah, even we sometimes can't understand what our children or people write on WhatsApp messages, right? So it's true. So in this case, teenagers are using language that is not known to us, and we need to find out really what their language is about and be careful, yeah, when we enter into polls that are very self-damaging. Okay, the next one. I think that really shook up Malaysia for some time. Yeah, this is something that's very sad, that we think that enforcement and judiciary are for us. We think that the police is for us, and but it's not always so. So we have to be very careful that we try to protect ourselves as much as we can and try to promote enforcement agencies and judiciary systems to be more responsive to online sexual exploitation. I'll come to that a bit later. And communication and ICT sectors do not have adequate safeguards to protect children online. And we'll come to that later too. And so with all this is why it is really important that we ourselves need to be responsible and know that this is a very serious and complex issue. Okay, next one, Maddie. Okay, so when we talk about online sexual exploitation and abuse, we really are talking about many, many different aspects of this online sexual exploitation and abuse. And so much of new technology has come over the last few years, yeah? So you can get all this technology, all this explanation on what is online sexual abuse and what it entails from various organizations, from ECPAT International, from NCSEC, from ECPAT International, from WHO, from the End Violence Fund, etc., and also from the ASEAN Plan of Action. So here are a few of what we really talk about or refer to when we talk about online sexual exploitation, which is producing, harming, harboring, sharing, or distributing child sexual abuse materials. We talk about grooming children, about live streaming, sexual extortion or sextortion, self-generated sexual content, sexting, cyberbullying. Yeah. So the use of the terminology really of online sexual Exploitation is the use of technology or internet to facilitate the sexual abuse of a child, including production and sharing of sexual, in producing and sharing of sexual materials. I think we must remember that behind every image, behind every picture, there is a child. It is not a made up kind of thing, you know, it is a child, and a child that has feelings, and a child that is being exploited. Yeah. Okay, the next one, please. Well, I'm not going to read through it, but you know what perpetrators do. Perpetrators are not only adults, but also can be peers and can be children, yeah? So mainly they lure you into doing things indecent and things that you don't want to do. And no child should be pressured into doing any of these, you know, sharing her images, sharing her intimacy and, you know, or indecent acts. Yeah? So no child should be forced or threatened or groomed into doing this. Okay, next page, please. Next slide. Yeah. In Malaysia, there have been 2 studies done. I mean, there have been more than 2 studies, but I'm going to refer to 2 studies. One is the ECPAT review on the situation of sexual exploitation in Malaysia. And the other one is the Out of Shadows Index. And both of these actually have been presented to the Malaysian government. We did a presentation where we had more than 100 people attending from government, from the industry, private sector, NGOs, community, etc. This was like 3 years ago, where we presented Malaysia's scenario at a glance. So the next one, please. You can't read it, so I'm just going to look at the next one. Okay, next one. Okay, so this is what our report says. A number of factors shape children's vulnerability to sexual exploitation in Southeast Asia region. So ours is mainly driven by technology and high levels of tourism. Because technology is evolving and so is tourism. So Out of Shadows Index says that only 3 of 14 countries have ICT that includes preventing sexual violence against children. And Malaysia does not have that. So Malaysia was given a 0 for not having the protection that is needed to delete or take down sexual offensive materials from the internet. Child sexual offenders in Southeast Asia are mainly nationals of the countries. Yeah, although foreign nationals, child sex offenders are seeking access to children through voluntary and professional engagement in schools, orphanages, and NGOs. And Out of Shadows Index also showed us that only 3 countries collect data on boys. So that is again very lacking. So I want to tell you just briefly on what the Shadows report marked us. So they marked us on the environmental factors, which they gave us a 64%. That is not too bad, our poverty index, etc. And then on the legal framework, and on the legal framework, they were concerned about the fact that we have a dual system for child marriage, etc., and that our internet providers are not having the, do not take down or delete all the sexual offensive materials from the internet. Yeah, as I told you just now, there was like 170 over 1,000 IPs that were uploading and downloading sexual offensive materials, and like 400 websites that put on sexual offensive materials that were identified. They were removed, but no action was taken. So we got a low score there. And then about government commitment and capacity, we have a very low score of 39%. And this is because we do have plans of action for child online protection, national child policy, child trafficking, etc. But none of these have been monitored and none of these have been evaluated. Yeah, so we need better systems for that. And yeah, and also as far as engagement of the industry goes, we had like a 55% because we do have, for example, DG that is helping us to provide education to school children through the Yellow Heart program. But but we need more than DG to do that. We need more private sector engagement. Okay, then we have then we have this study. The next one, please. Then we have a study by the Multimedia Commission, which shows us that 47% of children aged 5 to 17 are using internet in their daily life, and 53% of parents are aware that parental controls are available. And you know that during COVID, the use of internet by children has gone up globally, has gone up 3 times amongst children 5 to 10 years of age, and definitely in Malaysia it's the same. So the next one, please. About parents who are aware of parental control, and some of them do use the parental control, but most of it is to set rules on internet usage. You know how long you can use, etc. And parents either stayed nearby the child or discuss the child's use about online safety, and some resorted to checking child user resorted checking to their children's using of the internet. Yeah, which is good, but needs to be more. Okay, the next one. Next one, please. So disrupting harm. In Malaysia, we have everything. We have everything. We have the child, we have the parents, we have the family who provides support to the child. We have the schools, which is a very big part of the school system. We have health services and health workers. We have laws, legislation, judiciary, we have digital industry. We have all the components that are important to have a very good online sexual exploitation prevention and response for children. But unfortunately, many of them are working in silos, and we don't have collaboration and coordination the way that is needed for a seamless follow through for when a child gets reports that she has been groomed or being exploited to when a judiciary system takes place. And I must say that we did the disrupting harm study in Malaysia, and we found that the referral from the police to the judiciary was very, very poor, and in fact, almost lacking. So there's a lot of things to be done there. Next one. So this is what we like actually, to have all the dots, all the bits just now, the circles to be joined together and to be seamless with the child and the parents or the caregivers at the center of the whole circle. So it should be child-centric, child-friendly, and the parents and relatives be supportive, surrounded by caregivers, hospitals, health centers that can provide the care, counseling, support, and enforcement agencies to be more child-friendly, to take reports, to take action seriously, to do investigations, and for the private sector to be more responsive and responsible to take down all the sexual exploitation materials. Next one. I'm just
Dr.
going
Rush,
to
very
end
quickly.
here. Yeah, I'm going
Yes,
to end
okay,
here
so
by
perfect.
saying
Thank
that,
you.
yeah, collaboration and coordination is very important. And we have the ASEAN collaboration now. That next one that focuses on all these aspects. We can read that from the ASEAN Plan of Action. And the last one, please. My takeaway points, our commitment to keep children safe online, and that we need to know that it is our responsibility to monitor our child and to keep our children online, to keep our children safe online, and that every child has a right to be protected and to be safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rush, for this very interesting insight into what is going on in Malaysia at the moment. I was just going to say we can give you a little bit more time because we didn't manage to get our colleague from Korea connected, but now she's here. Delighted to see you soon. Very nice to have you on board. Thank you, Dr. Raj. So if you have any questions for Dr. Raj, which I'm sure you have, please put them in the chat and we will try to bring them up through the question and answer session. So we'll move on to our second speaker. Rangsima Deesawade is a colleague of mine at ECPAT International over here in Bangkok, where she works as a regional coordinator for East and Southeast Asia. Rangsima has an MA in Southeast Asian Studies from the University of Leeds. Her work at ECPAT is to provide strategic and technical leadership towards ECPAT's advocacy and programming work against the sexual exploitation of children in those two regions. Currently, Rangsima coordinates the Disrupting Harm project across Southeast Asia. She has worked closely with governments in ASEAN and ASEAN member states. And we just heard Dr. Raj talking about the regional action plans. And Rangsima was very closely working with ASEAN member states in drafting an ASEAN declaration on the protection of children from all forms of online exploitation and abuse, which was eventually signed by all heads of states of ASEAN member states during their summit in 2019. Excuse me. Following this declaration, she facilitated the development of a regional plan of action for protection of children from all forms of online exploitation and abuse. So we have the political momentum in the ASEAN region, and now we have a regional plan of action which was adopted during the ASEAN summit in October 2021. Rangsima, floor is yours, 10 to 12 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And I would like to say good evening and good morning, all participants, and especially PPSEAWA for giving ECPAT an opportunity, to join you in this very important forum. So today it's my pleasure to share with you risks and harms that children have faced in today's digital world. And today I'm going to share with you Thailand specific situations. So what is Disrupting Harm? Disrupting Harm is actually a global initiative between the three global organizations that is, as you see in the logo, ECPAT, Interpol, and UNICEF. So the three organizations come together for a joint collaboration to conduct research to understand more the scale and extent of online child sexual exploitation and abuse in 13 countries in Southeast Asia and Africa. Yeah, so this is the 13 countries that Disrupting Harm has covered, and of course in Southeast Asia we cover Malaysia as well, which Dr. Raj has mentioned a little bit. So why we need this research, So I think everyone is aware that online child sexual exploitation and abuse has been emerging crime, and especially during COVID-19, where children have used internet a lot. But we realize that especially in developing world, we do not have comprehensive evidence. We kind of know, from the news, from the law enforcement report, but we don't have a comprehensive picture of situations in certain countries. I mean, I would say in many countries. So that's why we thought that we should come up with evidence that we can, go to the government and say, hey, look, this is, the situations are this bad and we need to invest more in protecting children. And of course, this project has been supported by the Fund to End Violence Against Children. The reason why we thought this project or this initiative is very unique is one of that is because we use multi-sectoral approach in understanding the situations. So basically, we collected data from children themselves, as you see from the left-hand side. So under this project, UNICEF conducted the household survey with 1,000 children and 1,000 of their caregivers in each project country, and in this case in Thailand. From ECPAT side, ECPAT started with conducting depth review of relevant documents to understand the existing legal and policy framework. ECPAT also conducted interview with government duty bearers who are responsible for child protection, and we also conducted survey with 50 frontline workers in Thailand to understand their experience when they are dealing with cases of online child sexual exploitation and abuse, which we call in short OXIA. We did also spoke to justice professionals, including lawyer, police, prosecutors, social service provider, and we also talked to child victims of OXIA who have already gone through the access or who have gone through the justice procedures to ask about children's experience of the justice procedure. As part of this project, we also collected data from non-law enforcement. What that means, that includes the data from hotline, from helpline, from tech industry, for example. And on the orange side, Interpol, who are partner within this project, Interpol collected threat assessment, that is the number and all the trends and the type of crimes that are happening, as well as Interpol conducted capacity assessment. Basically, they interview law enforcement in each project country to understand what are the capacity of law enforcement in addressing this crime. So when we talk about OXIA, online child sexual exploitation and abuse, for this particular project, we include situations that involve digital, internet, and communication technologies at some point during the continuum of abuse or exploitation. So that means OXIA can fully occur online, or it can be a mixture between online and in-person interaction between offenders and children, but involving technology, during the continuum. And under disrupting harm, we only focus on 3 specific manifestations of online sexual exploitation. That is child sexual abuse materials, live streaming of children, and online grooming for sexual purposes. Now, I would like to share with you some of the findings from disrupting harm. So this is just a summary of all the findings, because the whole report is like 100 pages. So what we know, when we conducted survey with children in Thailand, we found out of the survey children that we conducted, 94% are internet users. And we found that in the children who are using internet, 99% of children go online at least once a day. 96% use mobile phone as key equipments to access the internet. And what are the barriers of children access the internet? We found that for Thailand, the barriers are interpersonal, in nature. So basically, most commonly is parents or teachers not allowing children to go online. And the problem for Thailand are not infrastructure, like, that children cannot access internet because there's low, level of connection for anything, but more likely interpersonal. We also asked children, where do you use the internet the most? And it turns out that, of course, 100% of children use internet at home. But very interesting, 85% of children say that they actually go online at the schools. Other popular places include internet cafe, which 58% of children in Thailand access internet in the internet cafe, 71% other more, and then there are other places, 74%. And what this number tell us. Sorry, if I can go back to this slide. So when we see that 85% of children in Thailand go online at schools, that means what? That means the schools and teachers have a big role, in ensuring that children understand how to use internet safely, which I will mention later. We also asked children, survey children about their experiences, whether or not they're subject to Oxia, and we kind of divide, different forms that children are actually potentially subject to Oxia. So we found that in Thailand, about 7% of internet using children were offered money or gift in return for sexual images or video. This is just a round number. We found that 7% of children were asked for a photo or video showing their private parts. About 5% of children were threatened or blackmailed online to engage in sexual activities. Around 7% of children had their sexual images shared with others without their consent. And 7% of children accepted money or gift in exchange for sexual images or video. If you look at this data, you might think that, oh, it's not so bad. But when you scale up to the number of total, children population, which Thailand has about almost 70 million population, that means the number of children who are subject to Oxia would be 100,000. And what we know, from children is we are so keen to know who are actually the offenders. And we found that children indicated that, so the offenders of Oxia are often someone that the child already knows. So they are not, strangers basically. Especially in the case of Thailand, we found that friends, both adult friends and peer, like friends at the same age, are most likely to be offenders. And this followed by individuals unknown to the child. It is found that romantic partners and family members were the least likely, according to the survey. And the offenders are actually Thai national than foreigners. So where this is happening, we found that children are targeted both online and offline. And when target online, especially the case of Thailand, Facebook and Twitter were the most common platforms that children mentioned. And of course, Instagram and TikTok were also commonly cited to a certain extent. The exception is Line application. In Thailand, Line application is very, very popular, but it's found, from law enforcement data, there's a lot of live streaming cases that are happening through Line. But, with a survey with children, these data did not come out. So when children are subjected to online sexual exploitation and abuse, so whom do children tell? We found that when we talk to children, we found 8 to 15% of children do not tell anyone about what happened to them. 8 to 15, depending on what are the type of abuse. Yeah, so children choose not to disclose this to anyone. And if they do, they tend to disclose to a female caregiver, I would say, especially the mother or the friends or the siblings. And we found that almost no one, which is between 1 to 4% of children, did not, almost no one disclosed to a helpline or the police. So what are the barriers, or obstacles?
Ying, you have
Sorry.
4 minutes. Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. So what are the barriers of children not reporting? And we found that the majority of children say that they do not know where to go or what to do, when something happened to them. There's an issue of victim blaming, stigma, and they feel, children felt that the problem is not serious enough. Sorry, I have to go quickly now. So how to disrupt harm? I mean, within the research, we also, provide recommendations to different stakeholders. And of course, very important thing, we need national awareness, raising education. We need to equip, caregiver, teachers, children, and the public about online risks. And we found that 47% of caregivers prefer to get information how to support their child's internet use from the school. Other, recommendation is strengthening child safeguarding policy in the school system, and expand avenue for help seeking, upskill the child protection workforce about these new risks. And of course, in terms of protection side, we need to create or strengthen police unit for Oxia. And if you are interested to learn more about disrupting harm in Thailand report, you can scan this QR code and it will link you to the report. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ying. It is really fascinating. I think for too long, this issue has been looked at as a Western problem. And with disrupting harm, no one really can suggest anymore that this is not a completely global issue. Disrupting harm firmly puts these issues onto the global agenda, and it gives groundbreaking insights. And has developed a methodology that can be replicated in any countries. In 2 weeks, we will start talks with UNICEF, Interpol, and the End Violence Fund about disrupting harm 2, where we'll bring this issue to light in 11 more countries across 3 regions for the next 2 or 3 years. And this methodology, I think, also has been applied by ECPAT now to explore other areas. And for example, in the Global Voice Initiative that we will hear about next. So again, thank you, Ying. And I see questions are coming in the chat. Please do keep posting them. We will try to address them. We're running a little bit behind time, but we'll see how this pans out in the question and answer session. So on to our next speaker is Sunhye Kang, who is Head of International Cooperation at ECPAT Korea. Sun has an academic background on criminology, criminal justice, and criminal psychology from the University of Maryland, College Park, and the Kyonji University Suwon in South Korea. She has been the author of a variety of studies and publications on these subject matters. And beyond her work in Korea, Sun has managed a number of projects of international cooperation supported through KOICA, the Korean International Cooperation Agency. For example, in building a support model to respond and prevent violence against women and girls in Vietnam, and in the Lao People's Republic, which still goes on until 2024, I believe. So Sun, very much welcome. The floor is yours. You have 10 to 12 minutes.
Thank you, Thomas. And I'm so sorry that I joined late. I miscalculated the time. So I will go right into it. I will try to make it quick. And thank you for inviting me today. And today I'm going to share about the sexual exploitation of boys in Korea. And the project that I did with ECPAT International to collect the data, the evidence-based data, and to raise voices of boys. And before 2013, the definition of the rape victim in Korean law was limited to only women. But as people started to realize that this can also happen to men and boys, so Korean government finally decided to amend the law and change this definition from woman to a person. So according to the report from Sunflower Center, it is the National Sexual Victim Support Center in Korea, and the number of boy victims are increasing every year. According to the report, in 2014, the number of boy victims was only 9%, but in 2015, it went up to 17%. And I believe very recently, this number went up to 30%. And it's maybe because the reporting rate itself is going up as well, but it is clear that sexual violence against boys is not a myth or urban legend. It is happening in our society. And last year, 26-year-old man was arrested for sexually exploiting about 70 boys in Korea. And he disguised himself as a girl or LGBT teenager using the social media and access to young boys between 11 to 14 years. And he produced about 4,000 images and videos of the boys, and he distributed them online. And he even blackmailed some of the boys, and he can call them offline and sexually abuse them. But surprisingly, it wasn't really getting much attention in our society, as it should. The attention from the public was quite low comparing to other online child sexual exploitation cases. So as you see in my example, unfortunately, even after the amendment and many sexual violence cases against the boys, there is still a lack of awareness about this issue. And this is mostly due to the gender norms exist in our society. And still, many people do not consider the sexual violence against the boys seriously. It's very sad, but there are beliefs that boys are damaged less by the abuse, and they would recover quickly than girls. Also, there are bias among service providers that boys are not cooperative in the counseling session, and they don't talk, and it's difficult to help the boys. And since this sexual violence against boys are somewhat treated as a social taboo, something not to talk about, so many service providers feel uncomfortable discussing about this issue, and they consider boys' case as a very specialist concern. But this may imply their lack of confidence about the treating boys. And since there are very few case studies shared within the community, this might cause a lack of confidence or lack of knowledge. And lastly, most of the centers are focusing primarily on girls and women. If you visit their website online, you can see that their English or Korean title has a certain center for women and girls. So by knowing this situation, I always felt the need for more research or program about the sexual exploitation of boys. And fortunately, in 2019, ECPAT International began the Global Boys Initiative, and ECPAT Korea, as a member of the network, could join the project in 2020. And we finally published the South Korean report in 2021. And this project was to study the reality of sexual violence against boys in Korea. And we collected evidence-based data since there are only few literature review and studies about this issue in Korea. And most of all, this project was to raise voices of the boys. We wanted to hear directly from the boys about their thoughts and what they actually want from the service providers or our system. And to do so, we analyzed the Korean law and we surveyed the service providers. And we provided a group activity with boy survivors. And these three steps are all connected, but today I'm going to focus on the conversation with the boys. The reason I would like to talk mainly about the conversation with the boys is because it's the first group activity with boy survivors tried in Korea. The purpose was to hear the real voices of boys about this issue. But however, since it's never tried before, there were many concerns even before we started. And our own staff members were worried about the lack of participants because there are a very small number of boys visiting the center. And they worried that this would make things worse for the boys. And people worried about the lack of experience with the boys, especially the counselors. And people worried about the blame that might come if things go wrong. So actually, during the project, we did face some relevant challenges, and the parents and counselors were refusing to even mention about this project to the boys because they believed that this could recall the memory of their victimization, even though the boys are considered to be fully recovered. But after discussing these concerns and challenges with ECPAT International, we could come up with some solutions, and we decided to carry on. And just to relieve these concerns for our own members to facilitate the program, we prepared 4 weeks of pre-training session for the facilitators. And during the 4 weeks, facilitators could learn more issues about the gender norms and social diversity and sexual violence against the boys, how to do the group work and risk management and the language choices. Also, we discussed about Korean culture with the consultants, and we developed our own activities for boys which should fit in the cultural context. This pre-training session did change a lot of our facilitators' attitude about this project, and it dramatically increased their confidence in working with boys. And after the training and recruiting process, we finally got to work with the boys. And these are the pictures that we did with the boys. And in working with the boys, one thing we wanted to make sure was that boys are comfortable, safe, respected, and they're actually enjoying the activities. So we did not want this to be a classic counseling session where people sit in the desk face to each other. Rather, we wanted this to be child-friendly, mobile, and fun activities. So we planned about half of the program to build rapport with the boys through these activities, and we used the child-friendly facility to apply activities that boys can actually walk around and participate and act proactive. If you see the picture on the right above, this is the room. This is the screen room that we used to provide this activity with the boys, and they play the room escape game here. They really enjoyed it. And after building a rapport and trust with the boys, we began to talk about the gender norms that boys face in their daily lives. And we made 3 fake Twitter accounts of 3 different men, and boys were asked what people would tweet about them. So boys could use the word samples on this picture, or they can use their own words to describe. And boys watched a couple of videos about gender diversity and other relevant issues. And under this stage, we kind of avoided, we tried not to mention too much about the sexual exploitation. And when boys are ready, after discussing this building of topics, we went into slightly deeper conversation with the boys. We used a live graph with the boys to share one story. This is the picture on the left side, and the facilitator shared their graph first to build a safe and comfortable environment for the boys to share their own stories. And when the boys were ready to share their experience, we did not go into details about the victimization. Instead, boys were guided to next activity, which you can see in the picture on the right. We used this gender tree to discuss how they felt at the time of the incident and what they needed but could not get at the time. And also the boys made their recommendations, commenting what should be changed to help the boys. And after completing the tree, we did not want the boys to go home with this remembering their victimization. So we made our closing activities to be fun and something to be memorable. So we made this bottle that boys can keep as a souvenir, and they can keep their messages for them in 10 years. So they can put it in this third bottle and they can keep it as a souvenir. And after this, we went back to the screen room and we watched the sunrise and sunset together and eating snacks and share their experience and what was their favorite activity. And we chit chat for a while and we let the boys to go home. So this is after the activity, we analyzed the data that we collected from all the activities. And this is the word cloud using the collected data from the activities. In this, we can see the gender norms that boys face in Korea. You can see here that men don't cry and men has to be strong, men are tough, and some bad comments about social diversity. And this implies the prevalent gender norms that affects boys, especially in the situation of sexual violence. And boys are expected to be strong and hide their weakness, even though they are having struggle, they are struggling. And these gender norms would hinder not only the boys, but also their parents to seek for help, especially if there's a father. One of the father of our boy had a trouble kind of asking for help because the expectation for his son is kind of conflicting with what he's actually seeing. And these are the actual codes that we used in South Korean report. And this code can show the boy's difficulty in disclosing the victimization. This is a direct quote from the boys, and they can show. It kind of shows the challenge the boys face in seeking help and what they actually wanted at the time of difficulty. And I was surprised to hear that one of the boys said that he was scared to tell others that he was worried that he might be arrested to the police. He was blaming himself for the victimization. And in
So
the overall...
You have 2 minutes left, just
Oh, okay. So I will go quickly, and over the project, we found out the gender norms are making it difficult for the boys to disclose victimization, and also the service providers and other people to realize the issue and to help the boys. So this socially expected image of men, that men are always tough and leading in sexual relationship, it makes the sexual violence against boys look less serious, and it moves the blame to the boys. And not just the gender norms, but discrimination of the sexual exploitation of boys can also bring the challenges in helping boys. You can see here, because the issue is viewed as very rare, unique, and difficult case, service providers will send the boys to another center, which is believed to have more experience and specialty about the boys. It was very interesting that opinion of referring the boys to another center was very different between the service providers and the boys. The boys saw it as a rejection and unwelcoming from the system, but the service providers were actually doing it for the good of the boys. Since it is a sensitive case in their perspective, they kind of wanted a better professional to treat the boys to prevent the secondary victimization. So this shows again the lack of confidence due to lack of education or training program about this issue. And also there were misunderstanding about boys' behavior after the victimization. Sometimes boys express they are struggling with other behaviors, which can be viewed as a delinquency. So some of the boys are sent to us as an offender rather than the victim. So it is important to understand that boys can express their struggles in different ways. And I'll be quickly, I promise. There are, inside of other many information, there are 3 key learnings that we learned. So people say the boys are not cooperative and not sharing, but we could see that boys are actually willing to share their experience and thoughts if they are in safe and respectful environment. And we could find that there are need for the better education and training programs for the service providers. And most importantly, we could confirm that we, the others and the service provider, think our thoughts can be different from what boys actually want. So in supporting and protecting the children, we need to include children and hear their voice. In that way, we will be able to make practical and effective solutions for the better protection system. So this is what we are doing after the this project. We are trying to keep our advocacy work and keep developing the activities with the children. And if we continue to spread out this idea, we could make this society more friendly to child in all genders. And thank you. That's all for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Sun. Again, a lot of rich information, a really interesting angle to bring to that conversation, and a lot of food for thought for discussion, I hope. We will open the floor for question and answer and discussion soon, but not before we have listened to some concluding observations and remarks presented by our good friend and partner and champion of child and women's rights, Mikiko Otani. Mikiko Otani is, of course, the current chair of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child. Next to her passion and work for the rights of children, she has also a long history of promoting girls' and women's rights. She's an international human rights lawyer based in Tokyo, where she's practicing family law with focus on women's and children's rights. The areas of her focus include human rights education, early childhood development, child participation, the girl-child, child marriage, human trafficking, migrant children, and access to justice. She's currently a council member of the International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute, a commissioner and a member of the executive committee of the International Commission of Jurists, and the country's representative of Japan for the Family Law and Family Rights section of the Law Association for Asia and the Pacific. As a leading woman lawyer representing civil society in Japan, Ms. Otani served as a vice president of the Japan Women's Bar Association, was a chair of the Committee on International Human Rights of the Japan Federation of Bar Associations, co-representative of the Japan NGO Network for CEDAW, a regional council member of the Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development, and co-chair of the Women Lawyers Interest Group of the International Bar Association. Ms. Otani holds a Bachelor of Law from Sophia University in Tokyo, Master of International and Public Affairs from Columbia University in New York, Master of Law from University of Tokyo, and a Doctor of Law from Aoyama Gakuin University. She's the author of a great variety of publications on addressing trafficking in persons as transnational organized crime, human rights, and international human rights lawmaking and development. Dear Mikiko, it's a real treat to have you here with us. Thank you for making time. We're honored to have you here. And please, the floor is yours for your concluding observations.
Thank you very much for very kind introduction. And also thank you very much for inviting me to this very important side event. And I'd like to congratulate the organizers because this is very important. And because I'm also coming from the women's movement or the work for the women's rights, I have been very much involved in the CSW for many years. And I have been always feeling that the children's issues should be more given attention in CSW, and the women's organization and the child rights organization should work together. So really, it's a great pleasure to be part of this event today. Because I think we want to have a discussion, so I'd like to keep my intervention very short. And I, instead of making formal presentation or concluding observations, I just want to raise 3 points, having heard all the wonderful presentations, and combine with something from the work of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, and also my own experience as a lawyer in Japan. Firstly, as you may know, for us, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, the most important document is the Convention on the Rights of the Child, ratified by 196 state parties. And we have the particular treaty, which is called Optional Protocol on sale of children, child prostitution, and child pornography. Recently, the committee felt that we need to explain more about this optional protocol, not only because of the so much technicality about the area of the issue of this area, but also because of the emerging situation about online. So this is one of the central topic today. So in 2019, the committee adopted the new document, which is called OPS guideline, to explain more to the state parties, but also to the civil society and everyone is involved. So today we heard a lot that a lot of technical term, and we need to understand. So this is the purpose of the OPS guideline. 2021, last year, also the committee adopted a new document, which is called General Comment. General Comment is actually the authoritative guidance by the committee to the state parties how to implement the Convention on the Rights of the Child and Optional Protocol. So this new General Comment adopted last year was focusing on children's rights in relation to digital environment. So again, this is very relevant document for the topic today. So throughout this process of drafting the guidelines for the optional protocol and also the general comment, I learned something which is very important in my view. Firstly, when we heard from the children, the very strong voice from the children was, no, they are living in online situation. So we always talk about how to protect the children from the harm. And I think, so this is a topic today. Children were telling us that they want to be protected from the harm, but don't prohibit them from using the online, because it's so much part of their life. Online has both sides, as we all know, positive and negative. So children wanted to be protected from harm, but want to use the online. So one of the very strong lessons from hearing from the children, we realized that we need to support the children how to navigate using the online, but how to protect themselves. They need to develop their own skills to protect themselves. And for that purpose, what is very necessary is to support parents or teachers who are around these children to know how much the children are actually using the online. And we learned from the data today, wonderful research we heard. So it actually shows that the online is actually part of the children's life. When I participated in a small workshop in Japan to talk about online safety, what I heard directly from the children who participated in that workshop was they feel that their parents don't know so much about the online terminology or the techniques, so to say. So it's very, very crucial to make the parents and teachers understand how children are using online, and actually children are much go ahead of us. So second point, I'm now coming. Another thing is that we tend to think that children are using online how many hours or but what also I learned from talking with the children is that online and offline is not so clearly divided. So for example, just two examples. Online sexual exploitation and abuse, we are talking today. So children are asked online to send some images by somebody who is online. However, one example to show online, offline is not so clearly divided. The children take photos when they are together, and then such image is spread online. Another example, very often when it happens to adults as well. When we are meeting offline, in person, at the same time we are online using mobile. So it's very difficult to divide online and offline. So the online is very much integrated already in the children's life. So that's why we really need to work together, everyone around the children, parents, families, friends, and everyone needs to understand this reality life of the children. Third point, finally, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, when we make recommendations to the state parties, we call states, after reviewing their reports about violence against children, we very often make recommendations, the awareness raising, because the prevention is so important and awareness raising is so important. Previously, domestic violence was sort of taboo. To talk about domestic violence. So we really needed a lot of awareness raising as part of the prevention. Now, the online child sexual exploitation and abuse, I think the Thomas in their opening remarks mentioned the culture taboo. We need to understand, so what is the, who are the people who need to understand and talk about. And I think the presentation today, Dr. Raj explained so much about the children at the center and the parents, family, siblings, friends, and school teachers, health workers, law enforcement, and also the business like digital service providers. So when we talked about the violence against children or violence against domestic violence in homes, we thought that awareness raising needs to involve the communities, families, and the children. So there's one of the recommendations from the committee previously was all say that the awareness raising community-based awareness raising involving the families, schools, and children themselves. But when it comes to the online child sexual exploitation and abuse, we still don't involve everyone. And so today I heard it's very important, and I found it's fantastic to understand who we need to reach out and also involve the children. And we very often hear that there is a hesitation and worry to involve the children in this conversation because we don't want to de-victimize the children. This is a legitimate concern. And the San talked about the pre-training. It is a wonderful practice, and we should do more, train ourselves before talking with the children and interview. But I'd like to raise one point, not only about the survivors of the harms which already happened, but also all the children who are using online. We can learn from them. When they found that some risk or the friends' experience, and we can learn from them where they can learn such a risk and how they actually, came from out of that risk before entering into the risk. What actually helped them? We provide a lot of information, but very often those information has not reached the children because children don't find or get the information from the place. The adults think that this is the place accessible to the children, but actually not. So we need to learn from the children effective way, where we put the information, in which way, and how we can help the children. So finally, the last point related to this third point, children can learn peer-to-peer. So it's very important to create the space for the children to learn each other. And also, I would say parents can learn peer-to-peer because, parents understand that parental control or the terminology children are using. And finally, all those, children, parents, and schools or community, wider community, should learn about this issue all together, to learn each other. So this is one of the sort of my own recommendation based on what the committees now advising the states, and also learning more and more from this kind of webinar today. So thank you very much, and back to you, Thomas.
Thank you so much, Mikiko, for being with us. And you know, you're very busy for sitting through all these presentations. We discussed with Mikiko a keynote intervention at the beginning of the session, but she made a very passionate point that it would actually be making more sense to listen to those presentations first and then come with some observations. So we really truly appreciate that you dedicate so much time to this session. Yeah, I think you mentioned some really important truths. I mean, a key takeaway really must be that, and that has been confirmed by all the studies that have been presented today, that our online lives and offline lives are so intertwined at the moment, and the borders between the two are increasingly blurred. So it's hardly any form of exploitation out there today that has not a number of online aspects to it. That's just the truth. So we need to also, it's our own challenge, I think, because for many years we have put so much dedication to the area of child sexual abuse material, the CSAM that we find on the internet, and because it's such increasing numbers, it's really an important issue, but that's not all when we talk online child sexual exploitation. And also, I couldn't agree more that we have to bring the information to children where they need it and not where adults think it should be, right? So that's why it's so important really to think about how to involve children, have their participation, consult with them in appropriate ways so that we can design information, support, empowerment for them that really makes sense for them and that they can access. So thank you so much. I've seen an incredible display of women's leadership today during these sessions. I would like to thank all of you and our speakers for providing us with their fascinating insights. We now have Q&A, but we also have 2 minutes left at my clock. I don't know exactly how long we have this room, but I've seen a question already in the chat that I think has not been answered from Jean. That is, when discussing the grooming or conditioning of children with self-harming, can be a child's response to the exploitation. My question is, since the child's response is a consequence of the perpetrator's intentional actions, are there any legal cases where such perpetrators are held legally responsible? Also, how do you deal with children who have been exposed to sexualized torture? That's Jean Searson, Persons Against Non-State Torture in Canada. For who is the question? Who wants to take that question? Dr. Rush?
Yeah, I can start and then someone can add on. I'd like to say that it is very, very difficult to detect a child that has been traumatized from sexual exploitation. And we have to look for the signs and symptoms, change in behavior, habits, etc., and make sure that the children get the proper treatment and rehabilitation and support. I think this is crucial because we have seen children that have not been treated and they fall into anxiety, depression, and self-harm. So we have a group here at the Women and Children's Hospital that are really looking into giving, it's in the adolescent psychiatry ward actually, where they're looking to give the proper care and rehabilitation so that the children can heal. But on the other hand, seeking legal redress has not been easy at all, because even if the child wants to speak, they will speak to the doctors because they're closer and the caregivers. But going to the police is something that is very difficult for the children. And even when they go, sometimes the police do not take seriously what the children say, because sometimes when you go to the district level and police are not very aware, as long as there's no physical harm, they don't think that harm is being done to the child. So I think the work on digital forensics is so important, and training of the police is very important. For Malaysia, for example, this has been brought up, and the government has given 100 extra police, especially to be trained for sexual exploitation of children. So this is work in progress, and I think lots more need to be done to train the enforcement and the judiciary. Because even if the enforcement goes to the judiciary, there's not always action being taken by the judiciary because they feel that the information for prosecution is not sufficient. Yeah. And getting children to speak, I think, is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And often the training also for specialized law enforcement is important, but then law enforcement moves on to other departments and the training moves with them. So there needs to be a general attention to all police that enter into the force on child protection and child sensitive interventions. Thank you. Mikiko, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I thank you very much. I just wanted to add the importance of training and awareness raising for lawyers. I'm talking as a lawyer now because I'm a practicing lawyer. As Rajesh mentioned, that it's such a hurdle for the children to go to the police and explain or establish the case. And generally it's difficult. And more so for online situation, because so many things are so technically, complex, and also to get the evidence, everything is, very complex. So between the children and the law enforcement, such as police or judiciary judges, I think the lawyers really need to play important roles to help the children. So medical doctors or the health workers, if they found some case which might lead to the legal responsibility of the perpetrators, also there needs some network between the health workers, the doctors and lawyers, how they can work together to establish the evidence, for example. Yeah. So that's my intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And coming forward for anyone who has an experience with sexual exploitation is incredibly difficult, whether they're adults or children. And it must be so much more difficult for children, where the adult world is already a little bit scary and intimidating. Yeah. And what we hear from children in all our research is that often to go to the police is the last thing on their mind, right? It's really, in many countries, we hear that would mean inviting more trouble to my life. And so that we really need to work on that aspect. We at ECPAT International push very hard for victim-centered approaches, child advocacy centers, or the European Barnahus model, where you have multidisciplinary teams of law enforcement, social workers, psychologists, medical teams that attend to the child right after it came forward and really make sure that the re-victimization once the kids go through the system is as little as possible. And that really involves a multi-stakeholder approach. So that being said, we are over time, but I've also seen that we haven't lost a single participant from our 58 participants today. Thank you so much. We will certainly share the recording of this and all the slides and all the materials that have been shared or mentioned in the chat. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Mikiko. Thank you, Ying. Thank you, Sun. Thank you, Dr. Raj, for your excellent interventions and inputs.